Hey everybody, Aromat here. So something I've had on my mind for a while is what races could or would come into Classic Plus. Definitely a bit of a controversial topic, but hey, maybe you'll find it interesting. Personally, I'm on the side of these things should be added, but under the premise they're in the classic style, and some unfortunate truths about them. Looking into the topic online, I found the most highly requested races. I'll display my own ideas for racials as I talk about them. Let's get started. Ogres, massive, brutish, and powerful. The most requested race for the Horde. According to John Statz, the author of the WoW Diary, ogres were planned as a fourth race in vanilla. But due to time constraints and the fact that female ogres were hard to design, they opted for trolls instead. I would love to see ogres finally added in, but if they aren't playable in retail, I don't see the classic team getting the green light to make them in vanilla. Maybe with a lot of pushback from the community, we could see it happen, but one thing's for sure. They'd have to be scaled down since Taurens have a hard enough time as it is. I think a cheaper, easier compromise is adding a sub-race option to the orcs, Mok'Nathal and Maghar, with adjusted racials and customization. While it wouldn't completely satisfy the desire for ogres, it would at least be something reminiscent of them. And even if ogres were added, I still think sub-races should exist to make the world even more diverse. Moving on. The Naga were considered for vanilla as well, same for goblins and Pandaren. In a behind-the-scenes interview for Burning Crusade, Chris Metzen talks about how Ogre and Naga are two races he still wants to see added into the game. But because of their tails, spikes, and lack of legs, they'd be complicated to design. Just like Ogres, I do think they belong, but the problem is both the Alliance and Horde despise them, which makes it difficult to logically add them into the base game. But since Classic Plus would have to alter the timeline and lore anyway, that's fine with me. The racials would definitely be interesting. Crushing Wave is almost one-for-one an ability the Royal Guards have in Warcraft 3, which is a very flavorful racial. The Murlocs. I've seen Murlocs suggested quite a few times, a surprising amount actually. I think as a race, it'd make more sense for them to be on the Horde, and honestly I'd love to play as one, especially a Shaman. But because of their primitive society, it would require a lot of good writing to make it work. In their defense, because of their more humanoid shape, Murlocs are definitely easier to make than the other two. The racials are more or less the same as Naga, but with the movement speed racial instead. So, I mentioned it earlier, sub-races would also be a very cool addition. Imagine if you could choose to be an Ironforge, Wildhammer, or Dark Iron, Darkspear, Faraki, Reventusk, Drakari, or Shadowtooth. For Taurens, you could choose to be a Bloodhoof or a Grim Totem, that kind of stuff. It would add a lot of flavor to the game, that's for sure. Since the upcoming races are ones we're already familiar with, I'll be honest, Blizzard will most likely just reuse existing races, and I don't have a problem with that personally. The go play retail rhetoric is so tiring. It seems like there's a disconnect where people can't comprehend that you like some things from the future parts of WoW. Without going into details about it, I think WoW is a great game until Legion, and I think Classic Plus should be a refinement of certain things from future expansions to a degree, but in a classic style. Despite popular belief, Pandaren have always existed in Warcraft lore, not just as Easter eggs. Chen Stormstout helped during the founding of Durotar. Afterwards, he wandered Kalimdor in the Eastern Kingdoms. That's why you can find his empty kegs in the Barrens. He even goes to Outland to spend time with the Draenei during the events of the Burning Crusade. Pandaren were always intended to be a playable race for the Alliance, but due to either disagreements with China or some other unknown reason, it never happened until Mists of Pandaria. I don't think it'd be too far-fetched to say the Wandering Isle swam closer to Kalimdor or something like that. After all, how did Chen get here? I'd want to see Pandaren brought in, but in a more classic art style, not only because there are people that enjoy playing them, but I also love the monk class. They wouldn't need racial adjustments, so they would remain the same. And since these other races are so similar, I might as well talk about them now. Furbolgs, Tuskar, and Wolvar are so similar to the Pandaren that it kind of boggles me that they're so heavily requested for Classic Plus. Well, I guess you could argue that Tuskar are different, being walruses and all, but still. Now what do I personally want to see? It's the most obvious road, really. Blood Elf, Draenei, Worgen, and Goblin reintroduced. These changes are easy to incorporate, just accelerate the timeline for the first three. As for Goblins, they can just be hired mercenaries for the Horde, from the Bilgewater Cartel. Naga for the Alliance and Ogre for the Horde, and then have Pandaren and Murloc as neutral races. This way everyone wins and nobody is left out. I'm not a fan of the other races I've seen pitched like Vrykul, Ethereals, Arakoa, Gnolls, Kobolds, pretty much everything you can think of. The question that remains is, what are we really going to get? I think we'll only end up with Blood Elf and Draenei, maybe High Elf and Goblin, which is a bit disappointing, I must admit, at least for me. So what would you like to see added into the game? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see what other people think. And with that, I'm off, and I'll see you in Azeroth.